pretty close to the right time anyway.
Yeah, pretty close, considering I've had to reboot everything this morning. Well, what it gets me is like you do the reboot and you get the circles that go round and round and round, the dots that go round in circles, right? And then it says 1%, 2%, 3%, 6%, pause, 7%, pause. Oh my God, we're not going to get this restarted. I'm not going to be done before 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it gets to 30%, the thing reboots, and then it says continuing on, and then does, you're up and running again. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Okay, so good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mike Cushman. Welcome to the show. Last day of school today. Oh, okay. Yes, of course. It had to be something like this. Thursday before that. Yeah. So last day of school today. Yep. Okay. That's a mad rush this weekend. All right.
Well, I don't have to worry about all the brats being around the streets anymore. They're all hunkered down in their basement with their phone. So I won't be tripping over all those brats coming out of school anymore.
Okay, so we're saying good morning to Your Personality Shows. That was a Facebook listener that has actually been listening to both this show and Spin Legal. Welcome.
Really?
Welcome. Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Shows.
So we had Spin Legal last night on the Invictus Legal Facebook channel and on my Facebook page, on my YouTube page. All right. Okay. So, right. This morning we got a few interesting. What was another? Yeah, Your Personality Shows is me, Chris Simone. Okay, there you go. Thank you, Chris.
Oh, AKA Your Personality Shows.
That would make a lot of. That would make a lot of sense. That is actually Chris's persona. That actually makes a heck of a lot of sense. That's Chris's persona. Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into one of the first news stories we've got. Healthcare sector's hiring temporary foreign workers like never before. We've obviously discussed on this show temporary foreign workers working in the farms and that around here, but we've never really talked about temporary foreign worker program as it impacts the healthcare sector.
I believe we're going to have more and more temporary workers. Really, I think it's going to even go into the tourist sector, where the tourist employers are going to actually house them, because sooner or later we don't have enough and we don't pay enough.
Yeah.
And the temporary workers they're getting, like PSWs, doctors and nurses and stuff from other places. I bet you a large amount of them come from the Philippines, but that's just a guess.
I'm not, without guessing at all where they come from, without commenting at all where they come from. My concern here is, how are the standards? How are our standards met in healthcare, particularly?
That's a good question, because how do they screen them? Yeah, anyone can get a piece of paper anywhere at all. Last night, I heard about foreign students, most of them being South Asian, in a local college where the lady who was speaking's daughter worked, and she says it was pretty bad. They don't have. They're coming over with very little abilities. Somehow they're getting into the college, and then they don't know what to do after that, and they're trying to get. They're cheating on their tests and all manner of other things. So I can imagine that the persons that are getting their degrees to come here and then just tanking because they can't handle it. They're supposed to be able to handle it by the degrees they come over with.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that is the same case with healthcare professionals.
Well, they're saying a large share of the growth that's driven an uptick in approvals of nurses, aides, orderlies, patient service associates. There were 2,514 approvals last year, up from 16 in 2018. So there were hardly any temporary healthcare workers in 2018 and 2,500 last year.
Yeah. So 2,500 last year. Wait, yeah. If you look at it, it's going way up. We just don't have enough. Well, part of the problem, and I'm hearing this like it's no real sort of epiphany to say that if you bring in a lot of people into the country and you don't build a healthcare facility to match what they have, who they are, or how many people there are, well, of course you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems with staffing and everything else. What is it?
That has been something that has been pointed out again. Because of the question about they bringing in 500,000 people a year now under the federal program, that there's no housing for them, there's no healthcare for them, there's no education for them. Well, there's education, but it basically means adding to the classrooms, doesn't it? There's no new schools being built.
No, and we got ourselves into a position where the universities and colleges will go broke if they didn't bring in massive amounts of foreign students, which brings massive amounts of money, but these kids don't learn. They don't, and they stay for a year, and then they're only supposed to stay for a year, and they're supposed to go back home if they don't pass or whatever else, but they don't. They stay. So that means there's more pressing needs on housing. But here in the healthcare system, I don't see this changing anytime soon. You just do not have the staff, and they're going to fill all the lower tiers of the workplace with the PSW class of type of person. But there's also doctors and nurses coming over, and you are right. You are right. Like, what kind of specialities they have, and do they then have to go through the same sort of procedure because they're temporary workers, not permanent workers? Do they have to meet the same standards?
Well, and that's and you say, hey, Law Society won't allow me to practice with my British bar qualifications, which I find disgusting. But yet they're allowing 216 family doctor positions approved, 612 positions such as nurses approved.
Well, the problem, as I see it, is they're forced to. If we had a super dearth of legal people in the country, you might find that they would relax that their prohibition against you in your bar, right? Yeah. But you would have to have a huge demand for them. Well, when demand comes up, all of a sudden you're the guy that was the helper for the plumber is now the plumber, because it's just enough to make it look good. But you can't do that in the healthcare facilities. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. We're all dependent upon our healthcare facilities. We all want better healthcare, and we all want better healthcare. But the thing is, and we also recognize that we've got a lot of people coming in here to Canada, the 500,000 a year. And that isn't a complaint about the numbers of people coming in, but it's just that the numbers of people coming in are always going to tax the system, aren't they?
Yes.
And we're not growing the healthcare.
What bothers me the most about this, we need a steady stream of immigration, and we've always been able to handle it. We had 150,000 every year, then we have 200 and 250,000. Way back in the early part of the 2000s, the conservative, the Alliance Party, proposed to reduce the immigration down to about 150,000 for a while, so we could sort of catch up with all the people that were coming in. That was 150,000. The liberals they have this idea, and this is the problem with ideology. When you have ideology, then you have belief. When you have belief, you just steamroll ahead because it must be the good thing to do. When you want to have 1/3 of Canadians born outside of Canada to come into Canada, if that is your idealistic goal to grow the country that big, and then you don't take into consideration where are they going to go to the hospital, where are they going to live? Is it going to push real estate prices up? Is it going to put a strain on the medical system? You don't do that.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think I'll ever forgive this government for doing that. It has reduced the standard of living for everyone around here. If they kept the immigration down to about 200 and 230,000, we probably would have been able to do it. But they don't, and they will not recognize the fact that that is the problem. What they have done is reduce the amount of qualified students coming into the country, because so many of them come into the country and they just don't do that well. And once they're here, they stay here, which puts more of a strain on the health system and so on. Just as a matter of, to give you an idea, I'll tell you what the nurses are finding in our own hospital here in St. Catharines. They're finding people don't have any money. That they come into the country and they have a baby. Of course, if you have a baby and start a family, that's going to increase your chances of staying here.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing they do. So people are paying the doctors with a money card. They're going to the ATMs and giving them money. So they have to pay for the doctors, and the doctors don't know what to charge because OHIP's always been paying them. So the doctors will just guess, well, okay, give me $500 to deliver this baby and whatever else you know what I mean? So they just get their money that way. And they're also finding they're having people, women coming in with feminine genital mutilation. That is, they have to cut open the vaginal opening because it's being sewed up, except for a small hole. And once they've cut that open, they have to ask them if they want to sew it back up the way it was. Almost every one of them wants their vagina to be as normal as possible. So almost all of them don't want it sewed back up the way it was. So these are the kind of things that are facing our healthcare professionals now, things they've never seen. I mean, can you imagine you're delivering a baby and it can't come out because the vagina is being sewed up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Except for a small hole on openings where the woman could get pregnant and where the woman can, discharge menstrual fluids and urine and so on. But what do you do with that? You might want to have a special doctor around that can do some reconstruction surgery right after the child is born.
Oh yeah,
something like that. So not only are we having people coming from all over the world, legal and illegal, we don't have the capacity or the knowledge sometimes to
deal with those issues. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So, and the other thing about this is that, of course, we've got a dearth in our locally trained doctors and nurses, haven't we? We don't have enough of them, which is, of course, what's prompting this.
Yeah, we're always a little bit behind in the public healthcare. But when we have massive amounts of people coming into the country, and I shouldn't use the word mass because that's usually associated with the right wing when they talk about mass immigration. But this is my point, that we have this idealistic idea. We're going to do that. The government is devoted to bringing in 500,000 people a year, and insisting that it's okay to do that. When asked about health and housing, they put that off into the back burner.
Oh yeah.
Originally, when Ontario was complaining they don't have enough homes for the people that are coming in, the federal government says, well, that's not really our concern. It's the province's concern.
Yeah.
When that didn't look too good to the public and they got a negative reaction for it, the government then came up with lots of money and started throwing money at municipalities. In fact, bypassing the provinces altogether and going right to a community and saying, okay, here's some money, or or go to Manitoba, here's some money, Manitoba, instead of going through the province, just so that they can get some headlines and hope that to jumpstart the need for, they really do want more residential properties because they finally clued into them. They don't have enough.
Yeah.
And now they're cluing in. I hope they're cluing into the fact that we don't have enough health workers. It just seems to me that this problem was very evident 5 years ago, and they haven't bothered to do anything about it.
Okay, let's answer some of these. Canadians First temp workers programs is an abuse, says says Mike. And I understand where you're coming from. Do they make less money? Are they housed by their employer? Why are they needed? Yeah, they are. They do make less money. They are housed by their employer. And the question about the nurses one has been, we have a backlog. We are massively down on where we need to be with nursing.
Yes, we do need them, and that's because of poor planning.
Right. Is there a pressing need for housing? Why, if there is a pressing need for housing, why are there so many empty houses? That's a good question as well, Mike. We've talked several times about that figure of 1.3 million homes empty in Canada. That number is growing.
Yes, and there's no effort really to put them into use.
Yeah.
We found that that problem happened in Britain, where wealthy, they suspect it was wealthy oil sheiks were buying up whole streets and not putting anybody in them, but they're just buying them for investment purposes to sit on them. I know. I walk around even my neighborhood here, and there's for lease, all kinds of like that.
Well, for lease is good because, in fact, it's helping the rental market. Okay, Taya Rowe says maybe the city needs to crack down on Airbnbs here in the Falls. Yeah, depends which type you're talking about, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. All right.
Yes, that's a possibility. I mean, the Airbnbs where they open it up for 18 kids on the weekend to have a big party, for sure.
Yeah,
have to crack down on something like that. Airbnbs. Well, there's a complaint all about Airbnbs and they're and because they don't pay the same amount of taxes, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of stuff like that. But the biggest problem is, well, like Mike said, there's lots of empty houses out there. But the fact is, even if we did open up those houses, we would still be behind because there wasn't proper planning done. If you're going to bring 500,000 people in every year, the first question you should ask is, where are they going to live? If you could absorb 230,000 and that was okay and you could do it because housing or whatever starts were equal to that. But when you double that number, where are you going to house them? But in this particular case, because we're talking about healthcare, how are you going to attend to their healthcare needs? And that means we have to bring in temp workers. How many other temp workers are we going to need? We have temp workers coming in for agriculture. So we can no longer support agricultural labor with the wages that Canadians make. So we bring in temp workers. Now we have temp workers in our healthcare. I swear that before too long, we're going to have temp workers in Niagara Falls because who's going to be able to live on those wages? Yeah. Who's going to be able to get a house or an apartment with those wages?
Well, yeah, exactly. And one of the big problems about bringing temp workers in on that basis is that they are hired for lower wages. They do have to be put up by by their employers. They haven't got any hope of getting another job outside of that thing. And hey, if you were a healthcare worker, let's say if you were a healthcare worker in Jamaica, for example, and you've got a full-time job, would you leave your full-time job to come here to Canada for 6 months?
It would depend on what kind of money you're making. And if you
possibly,
and of course, if you want to immigrate, if that's part of your problem, and that's a good way of getting here, because even if you're a temp worker, it's easy to slip through after a while. Like for instance, if a lot of the Jamaican community in Toronto used to be temp workers on agricultural farms.
I guess. Yep. Okay. All right. Yeah, fair point. All right, let's move on. So rents are up again. Well, actually, I'm not so sure. Basically, the average one-bedroom rent in St. Catharines was up 0.5% month over month in May of 2024. And the average they're talking about is 1663 in St. Catharines in May. Probably fairly similar in Niagara Falls, but St. Catharines is the 26th. Is 26 on the list for expense, on rent out of 35 Canadian cities examined. Now they're saying a 2-bedroom unit in St. Catharines costs an average of $19.36, down 0.8% from the previous month, down 1.7% from last year. So rents are going down slowly in parts of Canada.
And St. Catharines, but they're going up here. I would just like to tell you in our audience right now, I'm on the board of the Kiwanis nonprofit housing.
Yeah,
we have 3 buildings in town. We have 130 units. Tell me, just guess what the wait list is for our 130.
Massive, absolute massive. And you don't control that wait list, do you?
No, but we have requests for our people, like there are, and some of these people are downright homeless, so they really do need a place.
Yeah.
So we have 130 units, and officially we have 7,500 people wanting to get in them.
Wow.
And that is probably a very conservative figure. Those are the only ones that kind of get registered and actually put in the applications and so on. 7,500 people lining up for any of the 130 units we have available.
And all those units rent geared to income, or are they commercial rents?
So some of them, it depends on, like for instance, the Atlantis one, that one is heavily we work with the March of Dimes in there, so people with wheelchairs go into that one. A lot of people with wheelchairs.
Oh yeah. I know that. Yeah,
and they're completely subsidized. For instance, the senior building on Barker Street you'll have completely subsidized units in it. Like a single will only cost about $900, including utilities. Then you'll have affordable ones that are geared towards your income, and then and of course we look for people with low income, and then we have what's called market value ones, which are lower than market value basically. There's a unit in there that probably the one that costs the most is about $1,300 for two bedrooms, and they take care of their own.
We're working with in Victus Legal, we're working with a specialized home center, a women's shelter, well, not shelter, but women's basically they're trying to help out women in need, get housing. So I guess they would be closely linked to the shelter system.
Let me ask you something. I'm not trying to be mischievous here, but if somebody comes in and identifies as a woman, are they allowed to go in there?
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I'm just saying we're working with some of these people, and the complaints about the problem with Niagara Regional Housing is consistent and problematic. And one of the groups who's looking to build new housing in the near future, once they get their funding through, are actually looking at not accepting money from not accepting people from Niagara Regional Housing. They're going to do their own. They're going to set up their own, their own checks on people coming in. Because
what's that outfit called?
I can't reveal. Not allowed.
Okay, because in the board meeting yesterday, we heard about that too, and it's probably the same ones. They are kind of they're going to do their own thing. They're going to remove themselves from the Niagara Regional Housing, basically, so they can choose who they want themselves, rather than having to take.
There's enough people who will apply, right?
Well, you'll never have any problem there.
Yeah,
but they probably want to choose their own, because all you need, you could have 100 good ones and you could have one bad one, and that one bad one causes you an intense amount of misery. Like, we had to put up some pretty big money for security system in one of our in a couple of ours, and we're doing in the next building we're going to do it's going to cost us over $18,000 to put up a security system. And that's because we've had too many people drifting in, too many people doing damage, too many people coming in that shouldn't be in our buildings. Now, we set up a security system in one of our buildings, and it changed completely. We had our doubts that putting up cameras and stuff that would have any effect at all, but it did. It had a huge effect. Our tenants feel much more safer. We have a lot less people that don't belong there sneaking in, and all that. So that made a huge difference, just to do that. And but that's kind of the situation you have here. Even if you have a place for people to that are geared to their incomes and so on, you still have to pay a lot of money for things like security, superintendents, and all that other stuff. It comes out, and then you have to deal with one level of bureaucracy after another. It's great too.
Yeah, well, and actually, so Canada-wide numbers, basically the average asking price for rents for all residential properties in Canada hit an all-time high of 2,202 in May, surpassing the 2,200 level for the first time. Obviously, that's a Canada-wide average, not a not specific to any city. Canada-wide rents are experiencing a 0.6 month-over-month increase and a rather significant 9.3% year-over-year increase at the moment.
Well, I don't expect anything to change much. It may slow down a bit, but still the demand for those places are still there. And I don't expect it, like, if it's slowed down, if the demand for rent's actually gone down a little bit in St. Catharines, or hasn't raised as much as other places, that's because the people cannot afford them. Not because there's enough for everyone, but people can't afford them, so they have to push them down. Mike, Metaphysical Mike, says our city council just stood up and applauded the 20% of apartments being set aside in the 70-story building at $2,400 per month as geared to income. They have lost touch with what is affordable.
Yeah,
quite right. Yeah.
And geared to income is the answer, as obviously our cities Actually, geared to income, Mike, is actually geared to income is actually a statement is actually for people. The method of geared to income is actually based upon people's rent, based upon what they earn in terms of benefits. So geared to income has no relationship unless you are on benefits, right?
What do you mean, like Ontario Works or ODSP?
Yeah, you have to be on Ontario Works, ODSP, or other benefits in order to qualify for geared to income housing, right? If you work a poorly paid job, there's no housing geared to income, right? And Gary says this country is broken so bad. He's been on the list for 14 years. Illegal immigrants are put first. And is this okay? Yeah, I get where you're coming from. And Chris Simone is saying, yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, he's agreeing.
Yeah, so the problem here is we have no empathy. I really do think that people in City Hall or Ottawa or like Queen's Park or Parliament Hill, they are too privileged. Almost all of them are too privileged. They've come from money. They've had an easy life, including you and me, maybe. I mean, we could probably put ourselves in that category as well because we're not down there with the homeless or the people that don't have money and so on. You don't know the kind of suffering and anxiety and loss of will that happens when you just can't make it. I got a phone call from a lady a few years ago, and she lived in a terrible place and she wanted to get out of it. So she described it to me. She was a nice lady. She spoke very well. You could tell the woman was educated, but she was stuck in a place that was just miserable to live in. And all she wanted was someplace safe to live,
Yep.
And it wasn't going to happen. I had said I can't do anything about it. I can't.
Yeah. All right. All right. We're gonna have to move. We're gonna move on. Oh, hang on a minute. I've got one further comment. Look no further than the building on Atlantis. People are working, Peter. Yet they're paying $200 a month. This is absolutely ridiculous.
The building on Atlantis, the Kiwanis one.
I don't know which building on Atlantis.
I have to understand what they mean by $200 a month.
Yeah, I don't know either. There are some geared to income. He's talking about your building. That's what he said. Just yes.
Yeah. Well, they're a large part of them are in wheelchairs there. The one guy I know in there, he's got a pretty big apartment. He'd never get that these days. He got it many years ago when the building went way up. If he's in a wheelchair, he has to. He's got an electric wheelchair now, and he tries to make a little extra money by selling his other electric wheelchair, his old one, and things like that. So he doesn't have a whole lot of extra coin. Let's put it that way. Yeah, so I don't know what the people make in there, what the extra. All I know is they're happy to be in there now because it's all painted and brought up to snuff, and security systems and so on are put in place, and we've got better staff now. That's all a problem. So I don't know exactly what Gary means by $200. Is that
I don't know. I don't know.
PSW is being paid that, or?
Well, yeah, I don't know, to be quite honest. All right. So moving on. Niagara's rivers and streams have poor water quality. Why am I not surprised? The MPCA has revealed the water quality of a majority of local watershed rivers and streams is designated as poor or marginal because of contamination due to high concentration of chlorine, suspended solids, total phosphorus, or E. coli, right?
Yes, you're going to get E. coli, and that's basically because of the manure. So we still have a pretty intensive agricultural system around here, which is good. But what the bad part is, the phosphorus and the manure runoff into the streams, rivers, and rills around here accumulate, which damages the quality of water. The only time you're going to get good water in and around this region is where it comes up from the ground. So if you can be close to the sources of some of the rivers, like I think it's 12 Mile Creek is one of them. If you can be near the source where the water comes up out of the groundwater, you're going to be okay. But anything else, if you want to go swim in the Chippewa River farther away from the Niagara River, you're probably going to get contaminated.
I think I'm going to go out in the back garden. I'm going to dig a deep well. 200 miles deep.
Yeah, yeah. So do we have?
No, I'm joking about that. Of course, But yeah.
Oh, I took you seriously. I thought you were going to dig a hole. I see 200 feet.
No, but you see, actually, though, like a 200-foot well or something might well be what you need to do to clean water.
Oh my! I just got a very genuine friend request from a big busted young woman.
Another one of them, eh?
Yes.
Who has no friends?
Yeah, no friends.
Or maybe 6 friends, desperate men.
Yeah, and it has stuff. Loves older men.
And I don't know why, but when it comes to posing, the bust is always, the body is always meant to show the bust more, eh?
Yeah, it's like, hi, I'm Pamela.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Mike is basically, remember when cyanamide leaked cyanide into the Niagara River across from Niagara helicopters? I'm sure they're still looking into our, it's still leaking into our waterways. And I'm sure you're right, Mike. When you refuse to clean up all the contaminated sites, that's what you get. Phosphorus comes from the cyanamide properties and Cytec systems. Yep. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, and
I knew you would chime in, and you're always welcome.
Another source of the phosphorus is farmland, and because phosphorus is used in artificial fertilizers, is it not?
I believe it is. Yeah, I believe it's used in fertilizers of all kinds, actually. Yeah, and one of the things,
unfortunately, it's the same stuff that can be converted into munitions.
Well, Josh Diamond, the manager of watershed monitoring and reporting, basically said it's an issue. Anytime there are contaminants in the water, it affects the quality of life. So this is a report from Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority.
Yeah, and Eric Agostino, a water quality specialist, notes the concentration of fertilizers and manure running off the farms.
Yeah,
that has been a big problem, and there are ways that we can. For one thing, I think generally speaking, we over fertilize, and the runoff goes into the rivers. There are ways in which to make a barrier between the river and the land to make sure a lot of it we can remove, make sure it stays on the ground and not not going to the lakes. So they say here that they're working with farmers trying to mitigate that somewhat.
Yeah,
there are accumulated contaminants from years of runoff that were buried in the beds of water courses that have not been flushed out, including the chemicals of, I think, what Mike Cushman was talking about.
Yeah.
At least we don't have the chemicals being produced here anymore, and those were being dumped in our waterway. We have other problems, but we don't have those anymore, which is
Well,
good
actually,
thing.
the thing that concerns me is junk that is, old junk that is actually in the beds of these rivers, right? And that, because there's kind of contaminants still in the beds of many of the rivers.
Yeah, I remember they found that blob
Yeah.
in Chippewa River. They didn't even know what it was. It was a big blob. They
Yeah.
thought it may have come from Norton way back, maybe as far back as the Warriors, but it's a big black blob that was there. They got rid of it. I'm not sure what it was.
The
But it
other
was
the other factor here is that because the QEW runs through several major water courses, there are higher concentrations of chlorine on the surface water near Lake Ontario due to things like road salt.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Of course, we use a lot of road salt here. Places
Particularly
like
in the winter.
Alberta, they don't use road salt. So we use road salt here. And I suppose, well, it's a safety thing for sure. But when you kind of really put everything together and you think of all the runoff, we should be trying to look for alternatives, something that's less abrasive or less contaminating. So you have a lot of this chlorine coming from the salt on them. And of course, all that salt in its raw form would be bad enough. Karen Fraser is the chief advertiser for Zappy's. Karen Fraser's on that.
Our local Green Party enthusiast.
Yes, Karen, maybe you can come up with what is a good alternative to road salt?
Okay, so Chris Simone asked a question, and that's a fair question. How do you flush the pollution out of dirt? And actually, Mike knows the answer because he's been talking about the need to actually clean the dirt that comes from the former cyanamide plant. And certainly that's an important factor.
Well, here's one. Yes. Yeah, and it says still elevated concentrations of total phosphorus remain widespread in the central Welland River, with some concentrations greater than 20 times, resulting in algae growth. Algae growth was a big problem in Lake Erie, as you remember, and that was quite often thought to be because of phosphorus. And at one time, it was because of the ingredients they put in laundry soap. So when the laundry soap got discharged and got mixed with so you don't normally think of laundry soap as something that would be too much of a contaminant, but when it gets into the water system, then it motivates, is a great breeding ground for algae. So you had this huge algae blooms in Lake Erie. You still have them. Sometimes they're naturally occurring, but most of the time they're not. They start because of added chemicals we put into the water. So the health of we are in a situation where we have a huge watersheds all over the place. We should be in a situation where we have, if these waterways were pristine, or even half as bad as they are now, we would have a wonderful, healthy nature system here. Right now, we have one that's under stress because of these ingredients they're getting into the waterways. And there's a map here of all the different waterways that spill into Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and the Niagara River. So there's a bounty of creeks and little rivers and all that throughout this whole system here.
Well, if you think about it, every river that's here must flow out into Lake Erie or Lake Ontario.
Well, yeah, it's going to find its way.
Yeah.
However, so 20 Mile Creek Watersheds report found has water quality identified as marginal with high concentrations of total phosphorus samples greater than 30 times the provincial water average, and 14 and 8 of 18 Lake Ontario tributary monitoring stations. There's 84 stations in the area, by the way, where they monitor all this. So most of it's poor to marginal. For instance, 40 Creek, 18 Mile Creek, 15 Mile Creek, 16 Mile Creek, 8 Mile Creek, 6 Mile Creek. Somebody should learn should name these a little bit more originally, I guess. But 4 Mile Creek all had poor quality due to concentrations of
why aren't they?
Well, E. coli was high for Walker's Creek. Oh, finally one that didn't have a number in St. Catharines and Prudhomme's Drain, Lincoln. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. Why isn't 15 Mile Creek Maggie Mays Creek or something like that? You know.
Wow. So it's phosphorus.
Giblett Creek.
Coli used to be the biggest problems. Wow. Like there's, I'm going through these right now. Poor chloride and zinc around Hamilton Airport, and the NPC Bimbrook Conservation Area ushers users of fish consumption guidelines per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Oh my God. For the most part, Niagara's water quality is stable. After all that, they say it's stable. But I suppose that means that it can be cleaned.
Well, actually, stable just means it isn't getting worse or better, right? It's if you're comparing this year to last year, it's stable. That's what you mean by stable, I think. It's not a quality issue. It's a data. If you're looking year on year, we're about the same as we have been for quite some time.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. I suppose that one day that these things will be these creeks and rivers and rills that we have in abundance in our peninsula will be cleaned up. But it has got to the point where it's very hard. And of course, you're looking at agricultural land. It's one of the biggest culprits here. Do we need to put up a buffer zone around the rivers so that the runoff doesn't get there? The problem they have in China when they started to use artificial man-made fertilizers. Well, they got much bigger crops, of course, but the problem is they never learned how to use it. And Gary Wilkins says, Dave, a few weeks ago, you talked about that pile of contaminated soil on Thorlstone Road. Mike and I have many pictures of that same dirt that was dumped beside our canal that flows into the river. There we go again. Thank you very much, Gary Wilkins, a.k.a. Green Bastard. Look, this is another feature that never gets answered. Why don't we take that away and put it in a proper, hazardous
it needs to
dump?
be processed. Yeah, and the whole cyanamide area needs to be reprocessed.
Well, God, I mean, you've got stuff there that has been identified at risk to residents, and it's pretty close to some residents. Yeah. And of course, every time you drive by it, it kicks it up into the air, all manner of stuff. So why can't we get rid of it? I mean, right now we can't do much about the phosphorus and the E. coli going into our river systems because of farms. We have to work on finding ways in which to mitigate that as best we can. But in the meantime, we have contaminants just sitting there out in the open.
Yeah.
And like Gary says, one right beside the canal. Well, where it rains, where is it going to go?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's vital problem. And that's why, of course, we're finding all that rubbish in the rivers, right?
Yeah, I still don't understand why they keep getting the kind of three monkey approach. The cost, Dave, is enormous. Okay, that's
your key factor there, right?
Okay. Money. Yeah. Okay.
But the problem here is that if the cost was, say, if you wound back the clock and the cost was $1 million 10 years ago, and you wind forward the clock, and it's now 50 million today, and you wind forward the clock 10 years, and it's 250 million, you can see that you're better off spending the million 10 years ago to have fixed it.
Yeah, but then same problem back then. Where are you going to get the 2 million or 10 million or whatever $1 million you're going to need to fix it? Yeah, I definitely think so, and I think we should tap into the feds and the province for this.
Yeah.
You know, and the feds, the province, and the region. All in all, it's going to protect our people.
Yeah.
Another thing is, you know, that kind of thing, but I don't know. A voice in the wilderness sometimes.
Okay, so moving on. More than 20,000 children have been lost, detained, or buried in mass graves during the war in Gaza.
One of the tragic things about what's happening in Gaza now, the war is ramped up. The Biden's red line of Rafah just is non-existent. They're just killing countless amounts of people. The problem here is they cannot keep an accurate count anymore.
Yeah.
Because the Hamas government, you're a government official, you have to be part of Hamas. Just like during German times, during the Second World War, the firefighters, the police, the medical people all had to be part of the Nazi party. Well, the people who are Hamas health and safety people have to be part of Hamas to even have that job. They're not the ones carrying the guns, though. But they can't keep track of how many people have died now. There are 20,000 children lost. They don't even know where they are. They figure about 4 to 5,000 of them are buried in buildings, like in rubble. Thousands buried in mass graves in and around in the Gaza Strip somewhere.
Well,
but actually, the tragedy is we at this point now, up to 38,000 people, we have a very pretty accurate toll of how many people are killed and about 100,000 injured. We can't count on that anymore because there's not enough officials. There's not enough. It's so confusing there right now. They don't have sewers. They don't have electricity. They don't have power. The roadways are all bombed out. There's no place to live. So the government officials, the UN officials, the UNICEF officials, the Oxfam officials, the Doctors Without Borders officials cannot keep proper records, and that seems to be part of what Israel wants to do.
This particular story is talking about this gentleman who comes every day to sit atop what's left of his her home. Okay, that's weird because in fact they change context. So what for Al Nash who comes every day to sit on top of what's left of her home in the Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza, looking for her children and grandchildren, 5 of whom went missing after an Israeli strike destroyed the family home on October 20th. Right, so other than drones buzzing ahead, adult sons Nael and Nazir and 3 grandchildren are all missing. So 5 people missing. So 2 adult sons and 3, one 12-year-old, 5-year-old, and 2-year-old. They're all missing, and she's sitting there every day in the hope that they will come.
There are estimated that there are thousands of people buried in the rubble.
Yeah.
I think by this time there's about, and the Israelis are still doing that. They are destroying homes without reason. They're just going in and destroying homes and neighborhoods in Rafah. They're doing that in Rafah now. So what they've done in northern Gaza, they destroyed whole neighborhoods. They've destroyed the hospitals. They've destroyed the universities, and they destroyed the schools. And they're destroying houses. They want to make as much damage as possible. It's a revenge thing like you wouldn't believe. But the problem is, Hamas fighters make up a very small portion of. I mean, there was only like 35,000 of them, and Israeli army can't tell you how many they killed. They say they killed 12,000. Estimates by other sources say 4,000 to 5,000, and they're not really even tell us. So UNICEF, the latter reported that 17,000 children in Gaza are unaccompanied or separated from their families. They're orphans, basically. They have that.
And actually, 17,000 of them, these three children they might well be talking about may well be members of that, or some of them might well be members of that 17,000 list of children.
And what's that, an acronym that they have? WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family.
Yeah. Well, they don't know, because the surviving family may have gone in one direction and the wounded child may have gone in the other direction.
There are 100,000 people that were injured. So the pain of those, the nearly 40,000 people that have been killed, their pain is over. But the 100,000 people that were wounded, no eyes, missing arms. I was listening to a doctor that had just come out of there the other day, or they might still be in there, but a doctor or a nurse, I forget what her capacity was. She's saying that they had to operate with no painkiller. They don't even have a Tylenol, for crying out loud. Yeah. So they don't even have acetaminophen, and they have to operate without that, and they have to operate in circumstances that are beyond. What's happening there will never be forgiven. It is going to be the darkest spot on Israeli history forever. The Nakba was bad enough, but this is just, and I just don't know why the United States lets them do it. It is a horrible thing. Every bomb they drop on those children, and those children survive, is the next Hamas.
Yeah.
The children see these bombs coming. One half of Gaza is children under 14 years old. 65% are people under 23 and under, if you take all that. So what you have is, it's impossible not to kill women and children, much more than even innocent males. So what you're doing is you're planting the seeds for resentment. You're going to have terrorist after terrorist come after you, generation after generation, because each one of these kids saw their families getting ruined, their cities, their towns, everything being ruined, and they live in Gaza. You live in a reservation anyway, where you're penned up and can't get out or in. Yeah. So I know, I mean, and Israel says, well, we're so good to them. We employ 18,000 of them. Well, 18,000 day workers out of 2.3 million people is like not much. The rest of the people are unemployed and just sitting in that place.
The picture of this woman, she's basically sitting on a wall that I would imagine she's probably built around a pile of rubble. She's basically built this wall probably just to sit on every day. But essentially, when I'm looking at that pile of rubble that's there, and these wall pieces are clearly just part of the original house that have been blown up. But that pile of rubble, nobody's even sorted through it.
There are makeshift homes going up all over the place.
Yeah.
The witness that I was listening to yesterday, whatever she was working with, the stench is incredible. There is no sewage system. That's all being destroyed, purposely being destroyed. There's no electrical system. There is no means by which to get rid of your garbage. There's no garbage men anymore. There's no garbage men. There's no electricians. There's no plumbers. There's no plumbing to be plumbed.
Yeah.
So people are trying to live in places, and of course, you have sanitary problems. Not to mention the fact that there's not enough water and food for the people either. And that pier that the U.S. built that was supposed to bring in a lot of supplies is a complete disaster. It was $350 million down the drain. It was a
Yep.
complete,
Hasn't helped anybody. Yeah.
and the only reason why they built it was because they couldn't convince the Israelis to let enough food go across, and the average Israeli has no idea what's going on there, because their news system is being censored. Well, they even tossed Al Jazeera out of the country for now because Al Jazeera was reporting on the Palestinian side of things. So Israel didn't like that, so out you go. So you have an apartheid government, you have an apartheid system, and you have a jail system, pretty much an open air jail system. I just don't understand why the West keeps putting up with this. And now we're going to have Netanyahu come and speak to the Congress on the 24th. I don't think we will ever be forgiven for this. There were ways in which we in the West could have brought this to an end, but we haven't. And that's particularly the problem of the United States. I'll never forgive Joe Biden for this myself, ever. I don't care how much money he needs to get from AIPAC to win the election. He has to be moral sometime. Somewhere along the line, you have to make a decision based on morality. He's basing his decision on if he can win the next election, because he's going to need AIPAC in his corner.
But you see, he didn't, he's operating on the misconception of winning. He never won the last election. Trump lost it.
Yeah, that's
the crucial thing that he needs to understand. Biden didn't win. The people of the United States, by a small margin, voted against Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, I know I'm going to vote. If I can't vote in the United States, but I vote for Trump because I heard that he's going to try to make me great again.
Well, I was asked the other day if I could vote in the UK general election on July 4th because of my history with the UK. The answer is no, I can't. There is no foreign voter. If you're no longer resident in the UK, you can't vote.
There was a time where a British subject could vote in our election.
Yeah,
you didn't need to get a Canadian. You didn't need to get a Canadian passport if you were a British subject, and that meant from anywhere in the British Empire.
Yeah,
you could vote in Canadian elections. Can you imagine?
Yeah. Well, they changed that. The funny thing is about Britain, voting in Britain, you don't actually need. You need to be a permanent resident. You don't need to be a citizen.
Oh, that's gross. I think you have to be a citizen. Anyway, so this is what I'm going to propose to Donald Trump. I think you could get a lot more votes that if once you sell a pair of those shoes, you include a free Bible. If you do that, I mean, that's going to go a long way. Right now, you're selling shoes, and you're selling running shoes, and you're selling Bibles. But if someone buys, let's say, 2 pairs of shoes, and you throw in a free Bible, that'll get you a long way.
So when is he going to be put in prison?
He'll never be put in prison because he's not. I don't doubt for 1 minute that the charges against him will be overturned, because there are personalities involved here that made it their mission to put him into jail. And but they didn't leave the judgment. The argument can be made that they did not leave the judgment to impartial persons.
Yeah. Well,
he may be guilty as charged, and I think he is, but
how do you find an impartial jury in the United States when everybody, there isn't a person there who doesn't know who he is?
Well, the judge himself was supposed to be against Trump, and made it his policy to go after him. So he may be able to overturn that, and I don't doubt that. As far as Hunter Biden on the other side, and how he is kind of smearing Joe Biden's presidency. There's no hope for that guy. He's putting it up for repeal, but he probably will not have any meaningful punishment.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think we're going to have to call it quits at that point.
Yes, everyone, and without further ado, I bid you adieu and pray for peace.